Happy New Year and welcome to 2025. Before we continue on our journeys, we need to recap what we accomplished together in 2024. If you're new around here, I am a daily upload channel, mainly about Gibson guitars. Sometimes we branch out and have fun, but we're going to do things a little bit differently this year. We're going to uncase them, talk about their stories, and then lay them out on the tables and see them together. So let's get into this. This is the new Gibson Victory model. I'm a big fan of the Norland era guitars, so when I saw they were reissuing these in a roundabout way, honestly calling it a reissue is not faithful to what these things are at all, because they really just took the basic body design and changed everything about them. I personally think they're quite nice guitars. And even though I don't usually collect brand new models, this one happened to win the wood grain lottery. Not with the top, but actually with the back. Because I had called up a few dealers and I said, if you get anything with interesting wood grain on the back, please let me know. And the Gibson garage is like, yeah, I think you're going to want this one. And I said, yes, please. Even though I just reviewed this exact model in color, this one just happened to get that figured mahogany back. Next in our beat up late 80s, early 90s Gibson USA case, we have the original Victory. Imagine that, a novel idea. So this is actually a prototype I found this year through Chicago Music Exchange. So remember, all these guitars that you're looking at today have a dedicated review and demo on my channel between 15 and 30 minutes long, telling you all about their history. So again, if you're new here, subscribe, you're going to have a good time. But I do vaguely remember it was going to be a straight up cash deal, but I told him, you know what, I'm kind of interested in this guitar in your inventory. Can we work something out on that? And I couldn't believe it. A Victory prototype. Now you gotta remember, this is before the Victories were reissued / revamped. And yeah, it's kind of beat up, not the cleanest condition, but when it comes to prototypes, you just can't really care. But the original ones had these maple bodies and 3-piece maple necks. But I always like looking out for these stamped Gibson original prototype guitars. This is one that we saw last year in the collection video, but we didn't get around to reviewing it until this year for the 4th of July special episode. Another one of them map guitars. So these are the early 80s when Gibson decided to toy around with these in the Epiphone and Gibson branding. Am I going to say everyone needs to own one? No, they're more so a collector's piece. I bought this one in late 2022 from Carter's Vintage from the original family of the guy who made the map guitars for Gibson, Mr. James Hutchins. This one's an extra special rare edition because Florida broke away from the United States. 2024 was pretty good for my M3 collection. It's just a weird 90s Gibson model that this one is a 2011 reissue version of that guitar. Similar looking to the Petrucci model, however very vastly different. It's just one of those guitars I'll never forget the first time I played one. I was like, whoa, this is so non-Gibson, but I love it. Not gonna lie though, they are not for everyone, but since there's so many different versions of it and no good photo of a complete set, that is what my journey and goal is for. I think we had like 2 greens, 1 blue this year. A lot of them just had issues from the sellers and had to go back. This was the cleanest blue one that I had found, so good enough for now on my collection. I also got this one from 1997-ish. It's the All American series of the M3. So this was kind of a cheaper version at that point in time, but instead of your reverse Explorer style headstock, you got these new Steinberger style tuners. It's kind of vaguely based on a Firebird, but not exactly. But the colorations in the wood grain made this a must-have and document in the collection and show, because most of them just don't look that good in my opinion. They're very clunky guitars, this version, with the jam trem and 3 humbuckers there. But those dark colorations in this particular body, yep, that did it for me. But now from the original series of the M3, this was a pretty good find. Another MIII H Deluxe. There was only one of these that ever even showed up for photos, and it was in Japan and it had been modified. I ended up tracking it down, and when I got it, it smelled like smoke. I'm still airing that thing out, and the condition just wasn't really that good. This one had just recently showed up on eBay. And I kind of got the vibes that this was some sort of an estate sale. They were liquidating someone's collection. Now, this one's not perfect by any means. It's got a couple of dings, but I'm very happy. But in comparison to my other one, and it being such a rare model, I just decided to keep both. They're both good examples, just in different ways, because this one doesn't have a aged clear coat that much, whereas the other one does. And I'm just a big fan of multi-layered wood guitars when it's done as an art form. From poplar to maple to walnut to something completely different as compared to the other M3s. Our next one is also an M3, but from the original normal series, but this one has a very bright amber finish. To be honest, I kind of forgot about this one. And that's mainly because it's not the finish that excited me about this example. It's actually a Gibson employee factory error on this one. This model didn't exist in 1982. In 2024, we found at least 3 guitars that had misstamped 90s serial numbers as 80s. So I'm sure there's a humorous tale of an employee who's like, haha, let's play a funny. Or it could really be somebody just had poor eyesight that day and they didn't catch it until after like 300 guitars were made or something like that. But this one's cool too because it doesn't have the pick guard. The usual M3s do have a big pick guard that takes up the whole face of them, but it's celluloid, it off-gasses. I prefer them pick guard less. And if I'm going to have a regular M3 in my collection, I'm really happy that it had some weird serial number anomaly. Now, one of the few S-style guitars into the collection this year is the Trogly guitar. Now, what's the story behind this? It's actually a Yamaha Pacifica that was a viewer's first guitar, but he loved the show so much, he sent it to me around 2020, where he had his aunt paint the design onto it, but he did this kind of rocky finish to it. And then this year, the reason why I got reviewed finally is I partnered with a pickup maker who did all these 3 humbuckers, sent these new knobs over, gave us some options on that, and got this thing playing very nicely. So if you're looking for something a little bit different on the channel, here's an example of something like that from the year 2024. This thing was a lot of fun. So that's table number 1. Which is your favorite? I think out of the ones on here, the Trogly caster probably has the most original energy to it. The USA map doesn't really fit at all. The figured back is really cool on the modern Victory. I might side with this because that's the coolest one I've ever seen, but the story behind the serial number on that one's just fantastic. Now let's move on to the birds. This year we documented the 3 known colors of the Swirl Firebirds, non-reverse style. I think this is my first year that I actually got to document this version of the Firebird in general. I'm not a huge fan, but at least this one has a cool color to make it a little bit more interesting, and this is basically like a hot-rodded version of it because you get real humbuckers in here. They actually have a vintage-style coil splitter switch just for fun. This was from that time when Gibson first brought these back. And this one's from 2002. But what was kind of funny about my acquisition of these birds is the fact that I didn't even realize I was buying them all from the same guy, because when I first got them, they were new old stock condition, meaning they had been abused and locked in their case forever. Their frets were so nasty looking, but I cleaned them up nicely. But this was the last color in the collection I was really hoping to find, and it was when I put 2 and 2 together that I got the other 2 from the same guy. Like, yeah, if only I could find the green. And he's like, yeah, I've got the green I could sell you. So the rest is history on that, but I really like this Nickelodeon green slime weird looking one here. It's not my favorite, like there is one that's striped like a watermelon. I mean, they only made like a handful of these in general, so beggars can't be choosers. But if the right one showed up in the future, I might swap that particular one out, because that's more like wilted cabbage, which is cool in its own right too. But the first one that showed up from the set was the blue. And speaking of blue, the guy's name was like Mr. Low Blue or something like that. He's a drummer in this like country fried band that's like really crazy, having fun. But being a drummer, he just bought these as investments in the early 2000s, and he was kind of clearing out some of his inventory. So that's how these all came up at the same time. And blue and green are all great colors. I really like this one because it's like bubbles in the water or maybe a frozen glacier. But either way, interesting guitars. Kooky colors. And as far as regular, more traditional birds go, it's the Celebrity series that I added this year. If I remember correctly, somebody wanted to trade for a brand new Gibson model, and it just happened to work out for us. At this time, I do collect early 90s Firebirds. When they have the custom shop edition or a cool limited edition color, you can check out previous year episodes. That's right, I've been doing this collection video, I think since 2019. The formats have changed over the years, but this is what I added to the collection in 2024. So if you like what you're watching right now, you've got a whole bunch of other videos to watch too, featuring 99% different guitars. But the Celebrity series had not only Firebirds, but also Les Pauls and SGs. Check out the full review and demo to learn more. But what could possibly be in a Dave Grohl Epiphone case? Were you expecting a Trent Reznor unofficial model? No. So this year I kind of dove into the semi-hollows a little bit more. They've grown on me. Maybe not my favorite. That definitely still falls within the Les Paul. But this was a canceled model that never ended up happening and was gifted out to employees. Based on the ES335 Studio, but it just has a diamond F-hole in it, which is a lot of fun because you get Dave Grohl vibes and similar. The 2010s era signature models are just so much fun to me. But these did not come with cases from the factory. So the story behind the Epiphone Dave Grohl case is my version of that guitar. The case initially came damaged, so I got a replacement one. Just because the case is slightly blemished doesn't mean it can't be used. This was also the year that I discovered the model ES347. You guys are sleeping on these. They're a lot of fun. I was always just kind of confused. What on earth are these? It's kind of a mix between a 355, some 335 elements. But this seems to maybe have been a NAMM show display piece showing off the newish Silverburst finish and how it might look with gold hardware and a few other things that we discussed in that episode. Now what's very exciting is one more of these has shown up. Now it doesn't have the same serial number stamping format, so it probably wasn't a NAMM show display piece. But I had a very excited viewer going, "Oh man, I thought mine was the only one. I couldn't believe it." So there's at least 2 ES347s in Silverburst. But I decided to keep this one in my collection because it matches my Super Standard with its weird, goofy serial that it could have been a trade show model, as we talked about in the full review and demo. I'm glad I held out on this one because I'm all about vibes and the energy a guitar gives you. If you have bad memories with a guitar, why bother keeping it? And I almost decided to let this go because I just felt the seller hated me because I had to be the bearer of bad news that even though this thing looks really cool and was sold to him as all original, it's not. The celluloid pickguard destroyed everything on it and pretty much all the gold has been replaced. You got the new tailpiece and all that stuff, but it's still a really beautiful custom-ordered one-off early 90s Gibson guitar with a very interesting serial number dating to the 0th day of the year. So you know this thing was special, but the seller, Reverb, and I eventually came to terms on a partial refund. Least favorite part of my job in enjoying and documenting all these guitars is when I have to tell people that things aren't as they described. Because when he listed this guitar next, I was fully expecting him just to decline my offer and refuse to sell to me. But no, he did, so that's how I knew that there was no hard feelings. He's liquidating a collection of like 400 guitars right now, so maybe we'll see some more from him. But this was a 100th anniversary Chet Atkins Country Gentleman, a model that didn't formally exist, so kind of a research and development style guitar. Unfortunately, I was very, very, very ill these past couple of days, so I didn't get to read everybody's comments about this one. But it seemed like this video was performing very well. And thankfully this one didn't have any major issues wrong with it after a nice cleanup job. Pretty decent haul this year on the semi-hollows. If I had to name my favorite, just looking at them from here, it might actually go to the 347. If not that, here, I mean, this has got good history. It's hard to choose a favorite on that. Trent Reznor, not up there for me, but it's cool from a history standpoint. And of the birds, I suppose, looking at these three, it might actually go to the blue until I find my actual watermelon one. Feel free to let me know if you like the uncasings. Personally, I'm not jiving with it as well. I think I'm just going to lay them out and talk to them like we've done in the past. It's time to break out the Les Pauls. How many Spotlights did I purchase this year? Just 2, surprisingly. However, I do have a nice collection of these, so if you have a Spotlight that you're thinking of selling, feel free to reach out. I am the author of the fan site of these guitars, GibsonSpotlightSpecial.org, where I teach you everything about these, and we document pretty much all of them. The story behind this Antique Sunburst version is somebody's cat was having some health issues, and unfortunately he had to make the tough decision to sell his father's guitar. So that's why I have Cat on the case of this one. It's a low serial as well, number 14. Unfortunately, things aren't going so well, but they're still fighting the good fight. And he told me that he did not regret his decision in selling this guitar, because it provided some much-needed comfort for Robo. But the other one's the Antique Natural. It's the much fancier version. Not only do you get the natural finish, but you get the brown prominent layer of the binding versus the cream over here. Now, the uncovered pickups, that's not stock. Somebody had removed the pickup covers, if I remember correctly, but this one's got a really cool age pickguard. I mean, look at this one as compared to the more minty example. Then even look at the binding. Pretty cool. And of course, you can't forget their natural headstock. Deluxe. Unfortunately, this one has like a big gouge in the clear coat back here and tons of finish checking. But this one's serial number 135 if you want to learn its story. But oh yeah, here we go. This guitar makes me smile every time I see it. Mainly because of the doofy nickname I gave it. Call this one the Cream Supreme. If I remember correctly, this one's like 2006. So it's part of the original Supreme series when they still had the carved backs. But the whole point of a Supreme is they're supposed to be super flamey on the back and the top. And I always hated the solid colored ones because it's like, you don't get that. What's the point? I mean, sure, you still get the larger body, the golden fret wire, and our cool headstock, but until you have one and understand what the original Supremes do, you just won't understand it. But it's mainly in my collection because of the funny name. And we did the Matt Hafey prototype this year. Apparently he used solid colored Supremes, and those origins are actually based on those. And then this Ultima custom, my goodness. This is one I wish I would have got my first initial reaction to it again. Every time I open the case, it's like, wow. I was shocked when going through my records that I bought this in 2024. It was really early 2024, but I swear I've owned this thing for like 3 or 4 years because I've mentioned it so many times. Ultimas, I generally don't like them. They're too fancy and not very tasteful in my opinion, but this one, the natural flavorings with the crazy quilt. You get the abalone purfling along the edges. This one's extra special because it also had the stock flamed maple pickup rings. And this one's a 2014 and got the figured maple neck, which is not uncommon on this model. However, having the straight up figured maple chambered body, that is very special on an Ultima. And ultimately, that's the reason why I kept this one. So this isn't like the Les Paul when it has the wrap sides and stuff. This is just straight up maple body. I've got a couple of those in my collection now. But I got this one from a viewer and now channel member over in Australia. If I remember correctly, we traded some horses for this. I think it was maybe for the Adam Jones Flying V weird thing. I could be wrong on that. And I initially wasn't planning on keeping it, but I'm glad I did. The next one is a mid-70s maple fretboard Gibson Les Paul Custom. This was the year when we finally got to document a whole bunch of these maple fretboarded goodnesses. Because I've been waiting so long to find one that the lacquer hasn't been worn away and it's not like too badly chipping. This is one of the nicest examples that I've seen in that aspect. I initially had purchased it just for its case because Artist Series case, those are very rare. And this one had a MIDI system on it at one point in time, which was a real bummer, but I'm glad I decided to pick it up anyway because it's actually a very early maple fretboard example. This serial dates it to about 75, right before they started the decal serial numbers. So it's got that going for it, but I'm sure eventually I'll replace it for a different one. It's quite a chunky example as well. But this one I'm still dumbfounded by. The story of how I got Zakk Wylde #1. It was a gift. Somebody just really, really appreciated my show and wanted this to go into the museum collection. Now, was this the very first Zakk Wylde ever made? No. We still haven't quite figured out what that A means at the end. It could be the artist proof runs or anything else that we talked about, but Zakk did sign this in 2016. So once again, thank you, Michael. It was an incredible gift. I'm a big fan of this model, and to have this one is cool. This is another one. Every time I open the case, I'm just like, how did I get that? So this is a very early prehistoric era Les Paul. And you just gotta know, tops weren't that fantastic back then. Like, don't get me wrong, there's good tops in the Heritage series. In fact, there's some really good ones, but to this extreme, it's one of the nicest ones I've ever seen. It reminds me of some of the best Spotlights, just not chopped up. Now, sure, it's got kind of an ugly finish on it, but, you know, beggars can't be choosers. I got this from a friendly gentleman in Wisconsin who has a very similar disease as I do. He was just cleaning out some stuff. I've never related talking to somebody more than that guy. But next up, we've got that beautiful first year R9. So this is a 1993. Now, I think if you want to get technical, this is before the true custom shop versions. But it's so hard to find a good price on one of these, and I finally bit the bullet when this one popped up because I like to collect the custom shop edition guitars. And this is the final years of those. And one of the few times when it sometimes can actually mean it was made in the custom shop, when typically that is not the case. But this is just a really fine example to a collector because it's very clean. And it's important because it shows the 90s. This is like the best of the 80s. I also have like the modern day prototype NAMM show stuff. So I always get a chuckle when guys go, oh, it's another Les Paul on your show. You guys just don't get it. There's so many different histories and things to know about them. It's an evolution. And if you can't appreciate it, that's fine. Not everybody will. But for me, that is what I really deeply, passionately love. And I knew 2024 was going to be special, but it ended up being the year of the bats. This darn guitar finally showed up. Bats in Flight Purple. There's only like, what, 8 or 10 of these things made. Nobody wants to sell them, even if you're willing to pay crazy money. But somebody contacted me saying they had one, and they wanted more information. So I gave them that information, and they said, well, I was thinking about selling it, but not 100%. How should I go about that? And it's like, you don't even have to worry about that. I will happily pay you top market value for it. So we ended up making that deal, set a new record on this, but I could care less. I have it, and no one can take that away from me. But I did end up getting the blood red version first. It's a really nice looking guitar too, but I definitely prefer the purple in my opinion. But if I was actually going to seriously play one, I'd probably go for this because it's a little bit less gaudy, but still has all the other fun stuff as far as a figured maple neck, etc. Well, this was actually the first bats in flight I found. A viewer of the show sent me a Facebook Marketplace listing saying, hey, there you go, it's not the Les Pauls, but it's the acoustic. And the purple bats in flight acoustic, this has never shown up. That was the only one on the used market. But it ended up being for sale from a guy who I had purchased a special SG from before. And I jokingly asked him, hey, you happen to have the Les Paul? He's like, yes, the red one, not the purple. So these came from the same collection. And initially I just thought, I'll probably sell on the purple acoustic. I'm not much of an acoustic guy at that time, but I ended up really liking this thing. So much so, I bought 3 more acoustics shortly after. Because after all of our Halloween fun, they decided to reissue it, they being Guitar Center. So you got the J45 bats in their red burst finish. It's the only bats acoustic that has the piezo electronics so you can plug it in. But that's not why I kept it. I think it's better sounding than the true bats in flight. It's a little bit more bassy if that's what you're after. However, if you like the tinier sound, these are nice. I just think overall most people would probably prefer this version. And then, yeah, I did get one of the blue ones, but this is a channel members exclusive video until October. But I thought I'd give you guys a quick sneak peek. And then in researching the new bats and flights, I came up with this Gibson Bison J45. Another Guitar Center exclusive. I think it came out around that exact same time. I just happened to pick up the last one, and then they were gone. I just thought this was a very nice J45, and I love my animal-influenced guitars. So why not pick them up? All things considered, though, if I had to pick just one from this table, hands down, I would sell everything before I list that one. This table's a little bit more tricky playing what would you sell. Like, this one you have to keep because it was a gift, so I'm going to exclude that. But I would have to say the most historically significant guitar on this table would be this guy right here. But solely based on looks. Good old Ultima. Now it's time to get into some more good ones. Start off with this goofy guitar. So this is a Jonas Brothers promotional guitar. So this is before the signature model existed. Yes, there is a signature Jonas Brothers Gibson model. This was a radio contest prize, and that winner just decided to sell it on eBay, and I was like, yes. I just have a soft spot for the Jonas Brothers signatures because I'll never forget the first time I was like, what? They did that? I don't really have any affiliation for the brothers in their initial band, but they've had some good singles in their own solo careers, and I just like to pull it out occasionally to make people laugh and go, oh yeah, I completely forgot about them. But if I remember correctly, this pickup sounds a lot better than you would expect it to. Along similar lines, it's a cheap guitar, but this one's from the 80s. This is a Gibson Sonics. This one is in pretty clean shape, except for a big old ding on the headstock. Somebody rammed it into something. But it maintains most of its original satin finish, which is hard to find on this model. And it's a standard, so that means we've got the Dirty Fingers pickups in here. The coil split. If you're going to own a Sonics, this is the version you want. This year, we also got that really cool Sonics display stand that I've got over in storage currently. Now you might say, hey Trogly, we already saw a maple fretboard Les Paul custom. I told you we documented a lot of them this year. So this is a 1986. So there's the first generation, which is late 70s into the early 80s. Then they go away, but there is a small brief resurgence of them in the mid 80s. Now what's unique about these versus the earlier ones is this is when they transition back into the mahogany necks and you don't have a volute. So that's why this was a must keep for my collection because A, it's the mahogany neck, and B, it is just exceptionally clean. And nearly perfect on the fretboard outside of some chipping along the inlays, but unfortunately, you just can't avoid that on this model. Arguably, one of the largest videos this year was this little Spider-Man guitar. So this is kind of a collectible thing, even though Les Paul guys generally don't like graphics. People love this particular Spider-Man movie. They made very few of these, most of them going to executives. Check out the review for the full story, but basically it showed up on eBay for a suspicious price and really bad photos. Was 100% sure this was a scam, and I was just scam baiting on it, and it actually showed up, lo and behold, because yeah, I remember now. I bought this sight unseen. They did not have any original photos of the guitar, and they said it was still locked away in the box. But yeah, it's here. I got a great deal on it. Not scared to say that, but I decided to keep it because of that. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have cared for this model in my collection. Because I'm not really that big into superhero movies, but I love the song that's associated with this one. And they say that a hero can save us. But along similar lines is this thing. It's just a regular Les Paul Deluxe. I think I actually bought this one back in like 2022 or something, but we reviewed it this year. And besides just being in relatively nice shape, this one has a cool factory flaw where the Les Paul model decal was applied like twice. So I call this one the Double Vision Deluxe, you know, reminding me of the song Double Vision by Foreigner. Which even though I wasn't born when that song was coming out, I just love that song. So of course I need to pay tribute to that. This is just a cool deluxe. Next up, always wanted the White Scorpion in my collection. This was a limited edition 2017, 2018-ish guitar with an interesting paint scheme, kind of resembling a Spotlight Special in a roundabout way, but I bought it for my animal-influenced guitars, and I like the band Scorpions. And of course, we've got the cool Super 400 inlays with our regular custom emblem headstock, but the back, relatively speaking, is plain. This is a really cool 2008 Les Paul Custom. If you guys remember that Ultima I was talking about, it's got the maple body. For whatever reason, in the mid-2000s, they were toying around with that. So whenever I find one for a fair price, I make sure to pick it up because as of right now, they're not doing stuff like that. And these are just gorgeous guitars. Definitely check out the full reviews where we get like proper B-roll shots and show you it moving. But it looks like this is actually reissue spec, which is always lots of fun. And then hooray! I finally have been able to hold on to a Buckethead. What always happens is, with my collection, yes, this is my collection, but I'm a businessman at heart. Everything is for sale at the right price, except for a very few guitars. And I always get strong-armed off these things. But this one, I finally said no to all the offers. Because it was finally a first-run Buckethead that has the different binding structure as compared to the later ones. So I need a second run, as well as a studio back into my collection. But it's easily my favorite Les Paul model of the 2010s era. Baritone, ebony fretboard, kill switches, Buckethead's just a crazy, fantastic guitar player. I highly suggest picking one of these up. They're pricey, but they hold value, and it seems very unlikely to ever get a reissue. And even if they do, I think they would just sell out and become super valuable too, unless they give them slash treatment, which I highly doubt. They're just allergic to money, I guess. Or maybe Bucket has something against working with Gibson. But under new ownership, sometimes they can mend past relationships. But if you're thinking this episode, hey Trogly, there's not as many guitars as previous years, it's because I had to buy this thing back. The Steve Howe, the Les Paul. The journeys this thing has taken me through. When I first bought this guitar, it was simply because I wanted a wine red the Les Paul. I didn't know who Steve Howe was. But it's funny how I've gone from that to, oh yeah, Steve Howe, I've talked to him on the phone for an hour and a half without boring him, to, oh yeah, Steve Howe, he invited me to a concert backstage. We had a grand old time. I had him sign the back plate and I bought some pickups from him. So once again, thank you, Steve, for making all that happen. It was great and an honor to own this iconic guitar that was used in many music videos, including The Heat of the Moment, which is a fantastic song, so it kind of goes in with our theme that we had over here. But if you're thinking, hey, Trogly, didn't you buy that a long time ago? Yes, but I bought it back this year. I had sold it to a gentleman in Switzerland. And I remember last year at this time, laying out the collection video, I was like, it's only like a month away, we're going to have that. But I also bought back the Super Standard at that time. This was another one of those weird, funky serial number guitars for presumably the 1980 NAMM show that pairs with that ES347 Silverburst that we were talking about not too long ago. But this is like a the Les Paul in the fact that it has a figured back of the body. But this is not a maple body. It's still mahogany core surrounded by maple. And that's incredibly special. This is the birth of that in the late 70s. Well, I suppose you should say mid-70s when these were first prototyped. Next up, I picked this one up out of Japan this year. If I remember correctly, it's just an early prehistoric reissue from 1983. It reminded me of number 1 that I owned at one point in time. It just got that really nice dark ambered finish due to the smoky environment that it was played. And I just decided to keep it because I like the prehistoric era, and I just didn't have any in my collection. I'd gotten really heavy into them towards the beginning of the channel before I had a personal collection, so I decided to rectify that a little bit this year. This one's just kind of a fun one from 2014. It's a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Les Paul Custom. What makes it cool is it's got the aged Pelham Blue finish stock from the factory. That is insane for this particular era. Speaking of eras, it's within the rich light period. However, this has a true ebony fretboard, and I love unique peghead veneers. Another one I bought back this year is probably the cleanest Marauder in existence. I mean, look at that. Not all of them starred life satin finish, but there is a satin finished version, and this is one of the later ones, and it just happened to survive. I think I first bought this in like 2018 and I sold it. Because again, before personal collection stuff. Some of those guitars I still have yet to buy back. But most guys hold on to things for like 4 or 5 years and then they decide they want to try something new. And that's when they contact me and go, hey, you want to buy this back? And I was like, yeah, sure. Usually that's in my favor, but, you know, on these guitars, no. Had to pay more than initial, but it's a very nice example. I thought saying I only bought 2 Spotlights felt wrong earlier. I did get a third, and this is by far my favorite Spotlight this year. It's got the kind of top I like, and despite being my least favorite finish of the antique sunbursts, this is a very nice looking one that kind of blends the elements. You also got the Tim Shaw PAF stickers. One of those unusually high logoed versions. But that's okay, it makes it different in the collection. And I like it when they have little original store identifiers there. But this one's number 139. Then another great purchase this year was this one. This is one of the Pearl Plaque reissues, so again, think prehistoric, but before 1983, when they were just kind of like custom ordered one-offs from time to time. And this is one of the early ones in that. As I remember the tale, I made an offer on this like 5 years ago or something. And he declined at that time, but eventually my offer became enticing to him. So he sold it. And I'm very happy because it looks way better in person than it did in his photos. And then in laying out my video for this year, I was like, oh yeah, I remember this thing. This is a Heritage Series Les Paul, but it's a gold top. So you don't always find that, but they did make them. So obviously I want one in my collection because I've got the other ones as far as the Elites and the Standards and the regular burst colors. But a viewer of the show reached out to me because the serial number didn't really make sense on this one. 8 spaces 1004. So to learn more about that, you can check out the full review and demo. This is what it's about, my friends. The really nice Les Pauls, especially of the Norlin era. But don't forget about the modern ones. So my favorite ones from each table here. As cool as all of these are, if I had to only keep one, it'd be the Buckethead. However, I also know it would be the easiest one to replace if money is no object. Whereas this one and that one would probably be the hardest to replace. And as much as I love all these, I'm not making that mistake again. Moving on to set number 4. That's right. It's a robot. I bought it in February of this year and I left it sealed in the box. And I did finally record this episode. It's currently being edited, so I'm not going to say too much more, but yeah. Look forward to a headache of an episode that is the Darkfire. But at least it's the nicest Darkfire I've ever seen. And then we've got this silly guitar. It's the Paris Skyline. One of those weird 2018 limited editions. Most people don't want this guitar, but I'm glad I found one. Because most people would get a deal on this, send it to Lays or Historic Makeovers to refinish it, and then the history would be lost. It was a bad idea, but it's cool now that we know that there were very few of them made. And I got really into Mario Kart 8 this year, and I like that Paris course, so playing that song on this guitar in that review was a lot of fun for me. This is another teaser of a guitar we unboxed in 2024. Didn't quite get to the review. Poor thing. I've had this episode storyboarded out for 3 months, but things keep just taking priority. But it is a special Japan exclusive run of early Prehistorics. Here's another teaser of an episode coming up. It's the 335S reissue. We've done them in the past, but this one appears to be in okay shape. Still need to clean it up. I got it locally, and then I'll decide if I want to keep it for my collection or not. This next one is a very special Les Paul Custom. I'm not a huge fan of Burl Maple, but as far as these go, this one is tolerable, and it has a cool little clown figure in a half and half way right there. But this was seen in the Gibson Custom Shop Tour video this year. So when I saw it pop up, I believe at Bazaar Guitar, I had to purchase it to document. And I just saw it as regular inventory, and I still have it on Reverb. However, I learned something very fascinating that's making me rethink my decision to sell this. Gibson has discontinued the Crimson division. Apparently this was just a leftover Henry J era marketing thing, but they've used up all the booklets and they're not reissuing them. This was one of the last ones, and that, in my opinion, makes it way cooler than just being a Burl Maple top and being in a Gibson video. So yeah, I think I'm taking this one off the market. This is one we unboxed this year. It's a Gibson Futura. Most notably in 2024 is when Gibson let us know they had the prototype and they sold it for like $25,000, which I don't really agree with that price tag at all. But we might revisit this guitar in the future as the regular banana headstocked Futura. This Trinity Relish was a fun collaboration between samurai guitarists. He basically said, "Hey, Trogly, get good." Take my lessons, please. So I'm going to try to dedicate some time into taking his courses and hopefully get better. And this guitar was just, a fun cash alternative. And once this sells, I'm actually going to start a new series called $800 and Less. So we can take a look at more interesting guitars that are perfectly fine. Maybe not collectible, but just add a little bit of more variety to the channel. So feel free to check that out on my website if you're interested in a little bit of Trogly's guitar show and Samurai Guitars collaboration history. This was my favorite PRS guitar of the year, the Vela S2, I do believe it's called. I'm very sad to announce, if you ever worked with Jean at PRS, Artist Relations, it was very sad she retired this year. So there's a new artist relations guy there, and he's good, right? But Jean was a special lady. She was fantastic, and she's sorely missed. A part of me wants to keep this guitar because it was our last collaboration, as far as I remember it. But I just remember thinking this thing sounded fantastic. I didn't want to list it, even if it was just a marketing trade-off for a review. But the rest of tonight's episode is mainly what I consider inventory. Some cooler than others, but a lot to pay attention to here. So over here, we have a Jim James ES335 limited edition run guitar. I do have one of these in my personal collection. This is just a spare. I found it in some remote overseas country. They have gotten scarce on the used market, and I love it because there's an owl on the back. This late 70s ES335 Pro is just so cool. I've got it priced high, I'll admit that, but these cool Stage 4 guitars, you can't necessarily replicate them, and this thing inspired me to play way differently. But check out the fingernail divots. That's the craziest thing on this guitar. It almost bore through to the neck. Then yeah, we found that the headstock's a little crazy. But if you want a guitar that feels like no other, it's the neck. 100% the neck on this guitar. It's so nice and worn in. That's a great 335. But jumping to the 90s, there's a really cool limited edition Autumn Burst color here. I think that's what it was. I like it because it has this unique pick guard that's not going to off-gas and destroy your guitar. And it's got gold hardware, so I wanted to pick one up to review. And I do want one in my collection, but if I remember correctly, there was like a few small cosmetic details. Yeah, like a couple of indents on the neck that I didn't love. But I also don't have it priced at a fire sale either. But if I ever find the one that speaks to me personally, then I might get more serious about letting it go. But talking about serious of letting something go, nobody wants the SG Supreme. Nobody. Normally, I can buy a new model and get out of it within relative time. We're talking within a month. This thing, yeah, not a popular release by Gibson this year. Which stinks, because I would love to review the Koa version of this guitar, but this has not instilled confidence in me on the used market for the new Supreme. So if you're interested in it, feel free to give me a message. Another guitar that nobody asked for but Gibson made this year is the 12-string Firebird, non-reverse. Again, I thought I could buy it, get out of it relatively easily because we haven't really seen a big reissue of this in a long time or ever. But not a lot of love for this particular model when you can buy vintage ones for about the same price. Dave's Guitar Shop currently has one that has like some finish blemishes around here. He's got it priced under dealer cost and it still doesn't go. This is that model. Mark my words, it will eventually become highly collectible just because of how unpopular it was. Assuming they quietly discontinue it, as I expect they will. Next up, we got two Stratocasters. These aren't in my collection. They are sent in on consignment. So you can check out these episodes and make an offer if you're interested. But this is the John Mayer Shoreline Gold. This was actually very nice with the Big Dipper pickups. But by far my favorite was this Candy Tangerine over here. I'm shocked that somebody didn't pick this up instantaneously. It's got a pretty tasteful relic job to it. Not over the top. That's the way I personally prefer Stratocasters. And it's got a really cool figured neck. And then on a slightly happier note this time, a 1980 Flying V. A viewer of the show contacted me. I think they were just looking to sell this guitar. We ended up making a deal because I just love the 70s, 80s style Flying Vs. You know, the full Big Mac Daddy version. So once again, I professed my love for the model in this review. I put it up at a price where it will eventually sell. I have no doubt about that, but it's not going to sell super fast. It's towards the higher end, but it's one of the nice natural ones. And outside of the tuner leakage on the headstock, it's honestly in really good shape and plays well. Now, playing everyone's favorite, which one would I save if it was a fire? Man, that is tricky. It would either have to be the Putrid Pro, the Orange Stratocaster, as shocking as that sounds, that thing's cool. But most likely the Flying V, because there's so many of them that are broken. We might as well save one from being burnt up that hasn't been headstock repaired. Because if I had to pick based on playability, it would definitely be this one. And now for this table over here, there's not a lot that's historically significant outside of Burl Top. Everything else could technically be replaced, so this is the one I would say from a fire.
Good riddance.
And now, my friends, we've got one more round before we say goodbye for this year. Starting with an E2 CMT Explorer from the early 80s. I picked this one up from a viewer of the show. He just reached out to me and was like, hey, I'm selling this. Are you interested? I told him, it's probably not for my personal collection. Condition's just not quite there. And I've already got a natural one. But he's like, I don't care. Pay me this much. I'll say we're good. I just always like to be upfront and honest because I would hate to run into that situation where somebody's like, oh, I thought I was selling you this for your collection, and then I ended up reselling it. That is how I afford these guitars, is by buying and selling and making these YouTube videos, which are a labor of love and take a lot of time. But this is another one of those ones where I'm not sad if it doesn't go too fast. But this was the evolution of the Explorer, whereas this was the base level one, so they brought it back in 1976. But this was one, I think I bought it on eBay, something like that. I had a sneaking suspicion it had a chance to be a Carina-bodied one, so I just went for it. It ended up being mahogany, but that's okay. I needed to document one of those again anyway, and it ended up being a very nice player. This one is from the year 1982. If you're getting deja vu, yes, I do have two of these. So this was my review and demo piece of the Gibson Modern Victory. I'm still torn on which one to sell because I like the color on this one so much better. Like, it is way nicer. I don't know if it had to do with the color of the maple underneath or they just sprayed it differently. The whole gecko burst thing just works so much better on this one. But unfortunately, it doesn't have a figured mahogany back, so it's kind of hard to choose. But this one is available currently on my website. This one was a really good find this year. So it's a Zakk Wylde SGV. However, it's not actually a signature model. It's just a regular production SGV, which is basically a runoff in a custom color of his guitar, basically, which is very fascinating and rare. This will speak to the right Zakk Wylde collector. I kind of like it better than some of the Bullseye ones, because Gunmetal Gray is a great finish. But this is definitely a model Gibson will never make again. But from that SG thing to a more traditional looking SG, this is one of the Bohemian Minks. I've got two of these in my collection. I believe this is the one I will have for sale. It's the one of the two I decided to let go, but I have not had time to list it yet. I don't understand why this R9 hasn't sold. This is another one I got from that Wisconsin collection that I got that really nice spotlight out of. It has such a uniquely deep 3D flame top to it. I have not seen another R9 exactly like this one. It's just got so much going on. The lighting in this room right now is not the most flattering for it. You have to check out the full review and demo. Looks like this is a 2007 R9, but it also has a dark back, which you don't normally find on those, and has one of those sweet Madagascar rosewood fretboards. They just look so velvety chocolatey. I love these. This was another one I picked out of that same collection. Unfortunately, it wasn't what I thought it was. That is not the original custom-made plaque. Somebody could have added it. However, judging by the screw locations, it's probably just a reproduction that they put on a guitar that somebody had removed it. But it's a KM, and it's been refretted, so it's more so player's grade, so that's why I decided to let that one go. So if you've been looking for a KM that you can play with nice frets and a new nut, that's exactly who that one's for. Next, we've got the MIII Les Paul. This just came out not too long ago at the time of recording. It's a good example. It'll probably just take another week or so to sell, will be my guess. But hey, big news. I finally got the other Gibson USA Les Paul that I've wanted forever that has a very similar motif to it. So look forward to that in the early 2025 year. And here's a Randy Rhoads inspired 2018 Les Paul Custom with the heavy relic aging job to it. Anytime you can pick up a 74 reissue guitar with a Super 74 pickups, I say go for it. That's the same reason why these Bohemian SGs are so awesome. Very few guitars utilize the Super 74 humbuckers. I had a guy recently messaging me about this one, but he's like, hey, can you do XXX price on your website? Guys, if I have a guitar on eBay or some other sales platform, please don't ask me about private sales. I can't talk to you there about that. It's against the rules. So if you're ever like, hey, Trogly didn't respond to my direct offer question, only on my website and email can I talk about things like that, to be fair to all the sales platforms. Now, coming over here, I was wrong. So during my review and demo of this, it's the Tech Matsumoto 1955 Epiphone inspired by Gibson Custom Shop. I said, hey, they brought these to America. And then I just checked and they don't have any more. It's like they only brought a small run, and it's not like it said sold out. It was just nothing. I don't know if that's going to change or if they just brought a small batch, but hey, glad I was able to pick one up while I did. Here's another teaser for you guys. This Session Studio might look familiar. Yeah, even though it's the black one, I decided to pick it up from Bizarre Guitar because I thought the top was particularly nice. It's on my website, but it will be one of the first 3 reviews and demos for the new 2025 year. So you can look forward to that. This gorgeous looking Les Paul is a 1995 Custom Shop Les Paul Classic. It's in on consignment, just like those Stratocasters from the same guy. This one kind of gave me Slash vibes. But feel free to make an offer on this if it happens to pique your interest in a early Gibson Custom Shop guitar, because they only started that in 1993, late 93, and this one's what, late 95. These Charlie Starr Juniors were a hot commodity in the end of 2024. I personally really like the walnut ones, didn't really care for the satin ebony ones, but that's more akin to his guitar, I guess. But I was tempted to keep this one because it has this very interesting, almost rosewood-like pattern to the wood grain. But this was a cool release this year. This is one of the more memorable guitars this year. I believe, what is it, a 1955 Gibson Les Paul Special. Somebody just completely heavily modified it. Guitar Center found this at a guitar show, and I knew I was paying too much for it when I bought it, but it's one of those things where it's going to speak to you or it's not. And this one I said, okay, I'll put it at a price that I would be okay parting with it, and if it doesn't sell, I don't care. Having a, 1957 refinished TV? I forgot about that little fact. That does make this guitar quite cool. It's just the headstock repair that's a bit of a bummer, but it was a very clean job. I called this one the Mystic Maiden. Somebody was thinking they might have took this off of a decorative table at one point in time and put it on the guitar, because it reminded them of those pieces, but I just thought this had such a cool vibe. That is a full video you need to check out. Over here, it's just basically your regular R9 with an ocean water blue finish. You don't see that every day, but this is a Goro Yudo signature. We did review this, I think, back in 2020, but I took this one back in on trade this year. I forget the rest of the details, but I'm sure it's in the review. But he took this thing from brand new mint condition and he played it a lot. So even though I kind of want a Goro Yudo in my collection, not because I care about the show at all, but I just think they're kind of beautiful. So you can find that on my website. Found another Gator Green BFG this year. Essentially, whenever I find a clean one of these, I pick it up and then I compare it to what I have so I can have the cleanest Gator Greens. But eventually, I want the complete custom color sets of the BFGs because I think it's a really cool model. Still looking for ink blue and some of the signature ones, but I'm a patient buyer on those. I have to find them at the right price. This is one of my favorite late 2017, early 2018 era guitars, the MIII Les Paul Custom. Now, this is one I just found on Reverb. I already have one in my personal collection, but I'm like, yep, wouldn't mind having a spare, just in case. And to use it as trade bait to get the other late 2018s that I don't have. But it's got the rich light fretboard, black binding, fake diamond in the headstock, but similar to the 100th anniversary. But what's best is all this still continues on the back and the neck. These are divine. And lastly, we'll end off this year with regret. In this video, I said if I collect 2013 guitars, I wouldn't sell this. But the hardest thing about the collection this year was finding all the 2024 added guitars because they got mixed into all the other years. So I had to recategorize all of my inventory system to locate these. And in doing that, I realized, oh, I do collect the 2010s era of Gibson. I just didn't realize it, you know, like the Bucketheads and other signature models. And I was looking at like the 2005 Les Paul Standards, as well as like the 90s examples, some of the modern day. And it's like, I do have a hole in my collection from the 2010s of a Standard, and the quilt top is one of the upgraded, more rare ones. Why on earth did I list this on my website? Because it sold instantaneously, and I had like 6 other people saying, hey, how much is that guitar? I don't see it on Reverb. Where is it? Where is it? I'm sorry, man, it sold really fast, but thank you for checking, because sometimes it's just, I ran out of time, didn't get to list it. But rather than break this guy's heart, I guess I'll just find another one, because it's already sold. That is one crazily nice, super active moving top. And that's the thing about quilts. Sometimes they get so heavy, they don't move as much as this one. So for one last edition of if there was a fire and I could only grab one from this table, which one would be saved? Most of this is modern stuff that could be replaced. I'd probably have to save the Mystic Maiden. Although I would be very sad to know that one of the 25 Moonlesses got burnt up. And over here, as nice as this R9 is, I think for historical preservation, we should probably save the SGV. But hey, wait a minute, I was lying. There's still one more. We got old Jim Beam over here. There was a buyer in Canada. We were so close to working a deal, but it just didn't quite work out. But that's a fun promo era guitar. It's one of those ones. If it sells, it sells. If not, I don't mind holding on to it. Somebody might enjoy seeing that in the museum. But all right, Troglodytes, that ends the 2024 recap. We just looked at approximately 81 guitars. And for some fun numbers to look back on in the future, as of 4:30 p.m. December 31st, I had 309,125 subscribers. Shout out to the current 11 channel members. Your monthly contributions help make things like this possible. But most importantly is your daily viewing of my show. And as far as my most popular video, it's the $16,000 Fake Pit guitar at a staggering 1.3 million views. But hey, that $400 fake Gibson, but it ended up being a real Gibson's got 1 million now, as does the Stolen Flying V story. That silly 60s Standard video almost at 1 mil as well. But look at that, there's Spider-Man, a top 5 video that was posted this year. You guys sure like scam videos. But a very notable second place was only posted 2 weeks ago. Triplecaster, nearly 500,000 views. If that thing would have had another couple weeks, it easily would have been the #1 of this year. But alright, take care.